Okay, thanks very much then. I'll call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all members and welcome everyone who is watching us on the live stream this evening. We're glad that you're with us. So the second item I should say on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest they'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments. We have no open forum. We do have one delegation from John Mann, and I'll ask Tracy or Linda to bring Mr. Mann into the meeting. There he is. John, go ahead and unmute yourself there, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I thank Tracy Edwards for keeping me on the rails here. Tonight, Council will be passing a bylaw 49/2020 that it deems necessary. The Council finds it necessary to repeal the 6-month rule. There will be no discussion, no debate. The question becomes, why is the 6-month rule being repealed? Well, it's because it's unlawful, and you denied not only me, but every citizen of Saugeen Shores their fundamental right to not only present in the open forum and a delegation, but to hear what other citizens might present. And Council never heard those delegations or open forum discussions. The question is, why do you deem it necessary? Why was it not necessary a year ago? Why did you find it necessary to bar citizens from speaking in the open forum and also in a delegation? You prohibited them from speaking if they had spoken once before within 6 months, which clearly was unconstitutional. But not only was it unconstitutional, it did not even exist in the open forum. The 6-month rule simply was not present in the 6-month rule, and each and every one of the council people made it up. They made up a rule that did not exist and prohibited citizens from presenting and other citizens their fundamental constitutional charter right to hear what was being presented so that they could act upon it and support it. And also the council never heard it. So why repeal? There's no discussion about it. You're repealing it in total. There is no 6-month rule. There's no 1-month rule. There's no any day rule. It's because it's unconstitutional and unlawful. But the real question is, this hurt every one of the citizens of Saugeen Shores who wanted to very much to participate in the main beach revitalization that will forever change the main beach for the next 50 years. We all, people of Saugeen Shores, citizens of Saugeen Shores, wanted to be proud of this project. We wanted to be part of the project. And we were barred and prohibited from meaningfully being included and hearing others being meaningfully included, and a consensus made where we all participate. Not if we have $10 million, hell, I'm not even going to donate 50 cents to this project. But that doesn't lessen my fundamental right to participate in it. This is the biggest project ever to confront our council. And I've been shut out. We don't know how many other people have been shut out. We know some people specifically, but we'll never know how many other people were prohibited unlawfully. So how do we get a remedy for that? Well, council has to provide us a remedy. They have to start that process over to include our voices so that we can meaningfully be included, so that we can participate, so that we can say, this is what we want and this is why we want it. So the proponent can say, well, that's a good idea or it's not a good idea for this reason, and everybody debate it. So we come to a consensus and we all, at the end of the day, say, hey, we had our voices heard and we are proud of this project. Instead, you divide us and you don't even listen to us. And particularly when the rule didn't even exist in the open forum. How many people were prohibited from the open forum? And this is just 3 minutes of your time, 3 minutes of a citizen coming to express their concerns that you would support if you heard them, but you'll never hear them. That's why you've got to provide a remedy. And we shouldn't be left to the Superior Court, go to the Superior Court with a huge expense and the delay and so on to seek the remedy under the charter that's provided. And so why wasn't this repealed a year ago? Why did you find it necessary to enforce it so strongly? You're finding it necessary to repeal it today. Is it necessary because you don't no longer need it, because we don't need to hear from these people anymore? We're home free? That's where the Ombudsman and the Integrity Commissioner come in my view. As I understand it, they told you this 6-month rule just doesn't fly. It's unconstitutional. Why else would the Integrity Commissioner talk to me over the phone? Why else would the Ombudsman talk to me and other citizens? And I assume, and I wrote this in, I assume they contacted you. I assume they said, this is unconstitutional, unlawful. And that's why you're doing it, not because I'm saying it. And these people don't even live here. And if that's not true, why not respond to me? Say, hey, John, you're crazy. That didn't happen. Now, I was told it's going to happen.
Mr. Mann, it didn't happen. I've responded to it. It didn't happen.
Well, I was told by the Integrity Commissioner that he would get a hold of you. I was told by the Ombudsman that they were going to get a hold of you and express my concerns. And, well, that doesn't bode well for the Ombudsman and the Integrity Commissioner. Are you telling me every counselor never heard from the Integrity Commissioner or the Ombudsman?
I'm telling you that the Ombudsman or the Integrity Commissioner has not advised us that any part of our procedural bylaw is unconstitutional.
Oh, well, that might be. Maybe they didn't say it in those words, but they certainly didn't. Look, let's put it this way. I practiced law for 43 years. I can tell you for certainty that procedural bylaw on open forum does not include any 6-month rule. And your new procedural bylaw confirms that for me. And it confirmed me for it originally. So whoever's advising you, get your money back. And because it's taxpayer money, you're paying these legal beagles that you're using. I'm telling you, you violated our constitutional rights. The 6-month rule does that alone in the delegation bylaw, but it just simply doesn't exist in the procedural bylaw. And what do you replace it with? A new bylaw that you're passing today, where you can just find, if it's inappropriate, if the clerk finds it inappropriate, that citizen can't talk. Oh, but you can appeal that to the mayor. And if he finds it inappropriate, you can't talk. And there's no definition of inappropriate, of course. And there's no definition of how to appeal. And of course, the other counselors are not involved at all and cannot be, according to the new bylaw. So this new bylaw doesn't help at all. And on the open forum, it's got to be on the agenda. So you control what citizens who employ you talk about. If it's not on the agenda, you can't talk to the council for 3 minutes in an open forum. If that's not unconstitutional, I don't know what is. I mean, this council, I think, is the model, quintessential model for procedural swamp that is unconstitutional. So, but that requires a Superior Court judge to say that. Pretty expensive and pretty lengthy. But that's apparently what we're left with. And you're presumed not to do a useless or meaningless act. Well, you're repealing the 6-month rule in the delegation bylaw because it is unlawful and unconstitutional. You're not telling us, you're not accountable for it. You can enforce it, and then, oh, when you're caught, oh, get rid of it. No accountability. The only way you can be accountable is if you give the citizens a remedy, and the remedy is let us speak before you finalize that project on the main beach. Then we're all included. And it's got to be meaningful discussion. It's got to be meaningful and necessary. And that apparently will not be done. I have no hope in that happening without a court order. So where are we? We have the ombudsman, though, and integrity commissioner have spoken with you, though, have they not, Mayor?
I've spoken to the integrity commissioner in the past, yeah.
Well, why haven't we received the report on that before this bylaw is passed? I mean, I haven't seen anything from the integrity commissioner or the ombudsman yet in any form of report. And you people have been speaking with them. I don't know what other counselors have. No counselor responds to me. No mayor responds to me. I'm a senior citizen in this town, not that that makes any big deal. Every citizen is equal, and we should get respect from our council to respond to our concerns. I've received nothing, but when an ombudsman shows up and an integrity commissioner shows up, all of a sudden we get some progress, what looks like progress, but we go backwards with this inappropriate and has to be on the agenda procedural bylaw instead of just leaving it and saying, how can we help you, citizens? Let's hear from you. You know, it's just 3 minutes we're talking about. Most times we just want to say something, maybe challenge you. But oh no, can't do that if it's not in the agenda, and we don't pick and choose for. You can't pick and choose your fights here with your council. Just absolute nonsense. But what I'm saying is, repeal that, but don't approve this new bylaw. Just repeal the whole procedural bylaw. It's just a swampland of nonsense that's unconstitutional, defies common sense, and it has ruined this project that should be the golden one for the whole community, where everybody said, hey, I was part of that. Instead, we were shut out by our council. But what will we have at this new extravaganza? We'll have a plaque saying, well, this mayor and this town council, we caused this extravaganza, all these buildings on the pristine sandy beach that's legendary to be built. How that ever happens is beyond me, but we are entitled to our fundamental right, our fundamental charter right to be heard. We were not. We were shut out on an unlawful 6-month rule that didn't exist in most part, did exist at the delegation, but that you're repealing today. I want, and every citizen needs, every citizen has been harmed by this. We deserve to be heard. And when you repeal this today, we expect to be heard before this process continues on, and it should start over.
Okay, Mr. Mann, we've passed over 10 minutes, so maybe we can turn it over to council here and ask if there's any questions or comments of Mr. Mann.
Thank you.
Mr. Mann. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, John. I want you to know, John, I absolutely have never been contacted by the ombudsman or the integrity commissioner concerning the 6-month rule. So I don't know where that's coming from. I've never been approached about the 6-month rule from either party. So I'm an honest person, John, and I would have no reason to withhold that information from you. So I just want to let you know I've had no conversation with either party about the 6-month rule. I'm a little disappointed, Mr. Mayor. You know, 4 years ago, Councilor Grace and I, and Mike Smith was mayor at the time, and we brought in the and Councilor Matt was there, Matheson, Rich. You know, we entertained the idea of creating more open government, more transparent government. We brought in the open forum, and the idea was to hear from our community and allow 15 minutes, 3-minute presentations, non-debatable, agreeable. But if you want to debate things or have a little more discussion, I suppose, delegations provide a little bit of that, although we're not supposed to get into long debates with delegations. But, you know, it's kind of one of those things, you know, be damned if you do, be damned if you don't. I thought we were doing a good thing. I mean, we broke our procedural bylaw not too many months ago when we were to allow 5 presentations in an open forum. We opened it up one meeting to double it to 10 because we wanted to hear from people. I want to hear from people. I take a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails over the course of a year, like we all do. I want to hear from members of the public. I do my best to get back to people, and Mr. Mann said I don't go back to him. Maybe I should reply more to Mr. Mann. I make an honest effort to reply to, I guess, let's call it the majority of phone calls and emails I get. And Mr. Mann, if I don't respond to you, then whether I should apologize to or not, maybe I should respond to you more often. I just get a little disappointed when we're called, we're corrupt. And I've heard over my term of counsel that we're liars and we're cheaters, and maybe not for Mr. Mann, but others. And it gets to the point where you go, I think open forum was a good thing, but I don't think open forum was designed for people to come in and start, saying offensive things to members of council. I read the code of conduct today, and it talks about how we're to treat members of the public, and we're to treat people with using right decorum and respect, and talk to people again in a respectful way. And I try to do that as a member of council. The 6-month rule, I thought we were doing a good thing by saying, look, if you've got new information to bring to this council, I want to hear from you. I really didn't necessarily all along agree with 6 months and never hearing from the same person over the 6-month period was the right thing to do. We're changing that. We've got a 43-page report on the agenda this evening, Mr. Mayor, a community engagement report, how we can better engage our community. We're trying. And so it's a little disheartening for me, a little disappointing that we continue to be criticized for not being open enough. I don't know what more I can do as a member of council to be more open, more transparent. I invite councillors, members of the public, rather call me anytime, discuss anything that I'm able to discuss. So I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased we brought in open forum, and I'm pleased we're changing the 6-month rule. I like to hear from people the second, third, fourth time. If there's new information, we shouldn't shut people out. And I think it's a good change. So
The 6-month rule does
I'll just leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
6 months does not apply to open forum, period. Never has.
All right,
And
Mr.
you
Mann.
council people made up that, drafted it, approved it, and it doesn't even exist. So if our lawmakers don't know what it is, how do citizens supposed to know what it is? But I can tell you this, it isn't. It does not exist in the open forum. That 6-month rule was made up by all of you,
Mr. Mann,
which prohibit our rights.
one of the important things in the procedural bylaw is nobody has the floor until the chair gives it to them. So let's not speak over one another here. Are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Mann? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John. As the Vice Deputy Mayor reminded us, when open forum was introduced and accepted by council, from my point of view, one of the purposes of having open forum was to allow people who either didn't feel comfortable writing and presenting a formal delegation, or because of the timing of the presentation of our agenda, publishing of our agenda, which is Thursday afternoon, and the fact that you have to get a formal delegation in to the clerk by Wednesday, the Wednesday previous to the meeting, Wednesday at noon, that would limit people who review the agenda on Thursday afternoon and then say, oh, that's something I'd like to talk about to council. So some people are more comfortable with getting up in front of council and just speaking from the heart, so to speak. It would be nice if we had unlimited time to allow as many people as wanted to speak in an oral presentation in open forum to do that. But we also have many other things on the agenda. So we came up with a compromise of allowing 5 speakers, a total of 15 minutes. And in some cases, as the Vice Deputy Mayor pointed out, if there's a particularly controversial issue, the mayor has said, keep in mind that we have a lot of people who signed up to speak tonight. So if you can give your message in less than 3 minutes, that will allow more people to speak. Any democracy has to have limits. In this case, we have the limits of business, of the amount of material that we have to get through in a particular agenda. And so I guess I just wanted to say that I'm glad we have open forum. I did not agree with the 6-month rule. I'm glad that is that we are not holding that in our procedural bylaw anymore. And that's what I wanted to say about it. Thank you.
But it never
Thank you,
applied
Councilor.
to open
Mr.
forums.
Mann.
Never
Mr. Mann.
applied to open forum, Sheriff.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? I don't see any. Nope, Councilor Mayette. Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Just one more thing I'd like to add, and that is, first of all, I agree with everything that the Vice Deputy Mayor and Councillor Grace have said as to how this rule came into being, and I was in favor of it at the time also. But to the assertion from Mr. Mann that for some reason the process of the beach revitalization project needs to be restarted from the beginning, I think is rather absurd. There were multiple forums in which people had opportunities to express their opinions and desires and wishes and dreams and ideas and counter ideas as related to the project at the beach. We had open houses, we had delegations, we had online petitions, and we had letters written to each of us individually. We had people stop us in the community. We had multiple, and we were overwhelmed at times with opinions and counter opinions. So I don't think that that having the rule the way it was in any way limiting people's ability. If they didn't get a chance to speak for 3 minutes, then they would have had a chance in other forums to communicate their ideas. And we heard all the ideas, and I'm proud of what we came up with. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Well, how do we get back our 3 minutes that we lost? The court's the only place to go at this point if you can't remedy your unlawful behavior in this. That's all.
Thank you very much, Councilor Smith.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, as a member of council who was not present at the time that this bylaw was put into place, I want to, first of all, humbly thank the members of council who did put the thought and the forethought into allowing members of our community this opportunity to speak. So genuinely appreciate both your honesty and your integrity in having this platform available for members of the community. Having said that, in the day and age that we're in right now, as Councillor Mayette has pointed out, we as councillors and as elected officials are routinely inundated with communication from members of our community, both verbally, in person, or, you know, I'm a big advocate of accessing members of the community through social media. And I can tell you, much like Dave mentioned, we have heard and we will continue to hear and listen to members of the council, much like yourself. And I hope that we continue to hear from all members of our council. And I think that what's important, of our community rather, and what is important, much like Councillor Grace said, is that we need to give all voices in our community an opportunity to be heard. And I strongly believe that was the message behind some of the constraints that have been put in place with this bylaw, is that we want to be able to hear from the most amount of members of our community that we can. And as you'll hear, if you're able to stick with us through the remainder of tonight's agenda, we'll talk about the engagement survey, and there are specific mention to ways in which to diversify the communication and the correspondence that we have with our community members. And I hope that we're going to see that as well. So thank you for your time tonight, John.
Thank you. Okay, is there anything further? I think we've had a good conversation about this, so thank you very much, Mr. Mann, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Mayor. Take care.
Okay, so we'll move on then to reports of municipal officers and committees, and 7.2, the general government report. And the first report there is a staff report on the engagement strategy and the director of strategic initiatives.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our team has prepared the town's first engagement strategy. This strategy is a first version, supporting a thoughtful and corporate approach for public consultation and public engagement. The strategy does not replace legislative consultation, but rather streamlines additional efforts and aligns communication practices. Once this document is received by council, staff will plan for internal training to ensure the strategy is properly executed. This is the first version of the strategy, and staff expect the document to evolve. Some feedback has been received, and there are language changes planned for the next version, which will be coming back to council in August. I'd like to thank those who have provided some comment and perspective, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council receive the town of Saugeen Shores engagement strategy. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jessica and Dana, our communications officer, for all your hard work on this document. It was really impressive, and I appreciate the recognition that you have given to seasonal residents. I think that's a very important part of our community, obviously, and it's important to right up front include them in any engagement strategy. I also appreciate the fact that this policy recognizes the importance of inclusivity, transparency, and providing meaningful and early opportunities for engagement. And thank you for quickly responding to my questions earlier today. There are a couple of points that I wanted to emphasize and respond to. Some that I agree with and some that I've offered as suggestions for perhaps some kind of change, and you said that you would consider that. I really believe we must listen to everyone, even residents who criticize proposals. And I think it's very important for us to listen to those voices without any kind of judgmental description. So I'm uncomfortable with descriptors like uninformed or squeaky wheels or argumentative. I think it's important that we provide our residents with as complete and unbiased information about a proposed project as possible, and at the same time recognize that residents may have additional information that can be very valuable for us in making the best decisions possible for our community. A section of the report on page 27 states that we need to ensure that the media, this is a quotation, ensure that the media has the facts and that the public should be, quote, getting information from a technical expert. While it's important for us to have factual information, I think it's also important for us to remember that we shouldn't rely on the proponents or critics of a proposed project to present a complete and unbiased version of facts. Our staff needs to be open to information from other sources which may present different facts and perspectives. Just as your report talks about the importance of our values and upholding our values, it's important that our decision-making takes into account factors which improve the quality of our lives, but may not be so easily quantified as in talking about facts. For instance, protecting our natural beauty, sustaining the environment, or upholding the charm and character of heritage buildings. Specifically pertaining to a statement in the strategy on page 28, which says, don't use open houses, public meetings, and town halls when emotions may run high and stakeholders may be seeking an open forum to vent their frustrations, or when the topic is overly controversial. I strongly disagree with this approach. I think that public meetings can and should be held even if the topic is controversial. For example, in Mr. Mann's delegation, he talked about the public meetings on the Cedar Crescent Village proposal, certainly a topic that was controversial. And ultimately, some members of the public disagreed with council's decision. But those meetings allowed members of the public to state their views publicly, which is a very important component of democratic government. I also believe that all of our informational open houses should include an opportunity for a group question and answer session. By doing this, we allow members of the public and staff to participate in a valuable and public exchange of ideas. If the town or proponent of a project is not willing to stand up in a public meeting and answer questions about a controversial topic, then I don't think we should be supporting that project. So your report recognizes that the public becomes frustrated if information is not shared openly or completely, and having public meetings, even for controversial subjects, is one of the most important ways to do that, in my opinion. Again, thanks for the report, and I look forward to seeing the final version.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I would also like to recognize the efforts by our communications team and by yourself, Jessica. This is a tremendous amount of work that went into this. I do have a question. Early in the background section, it refers to an engagement consultation that took place in June of 2019. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. Further to that, at this point, I mean, my curiosity is what's next in terms of this strategy. Does this feed into a procedure at some point? Because obviously the document seems a bit cumbersome and it outlines some ideals, I'll say, in reference to what could be conceived as an unrealistic timeline for project planning, where it references anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks lead time to prepare these various documents in preparation for a project. Is there a next level tier of document that comes after the strategy that sort of gives more tactical, or who's the end user of this strategy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So thanks for that question. It's a very good question. The user of this strategy really is staff. It's our project managers. It's our subject matter experts. So what we're doing right now, there's an appendix in the back that's a communication and engagement template. And that's a template that we have been using in-house. What that does is it allows our communications professional, Dana, it allows Dana to work directly with the subject matter expert to craft up key messaging, to learn about the project that's coming forward. And generally we do that at budget when budget's approved. That allows that good leeway to understand what projects are maybe politically or community sensitive, what may be controversial. And we have some criteria to spell that out. And then Dana works with that subject matter expert to craft those messages and starts to understand the areas that may be concerned. Is it an expensive project? Does it have a delayed service disruption, as an example? So we have some of that criteria. So we're already doing a bit of that community, communications conversation with the subject matter expert, because we recognize that communications is key to any project success and transparency. So that's been working very well. What this strategy does now is it's a procedure, certainly, and it will allow Dana and the subject matter expert, when they're talking about communication and they're talking about key message, now it allows the communication specialist to say, how are you going to engage? On the spectrum of engagement, is this an inform project, or is this a consult project, or an involve project, etc.? And that list of spectrum of engagement is found on page 12, and is certainly a helpful tool for us as staff and for subject matter experts to identify which stream their project is in. A good example, if we are committing to inform, it may be a project that has to get done. Road repair, as an example, is an inform. We're going to let residents know this road may be out of service for this amount of time. However, and we may not necessarily be asking for consultation on that project, because we know it has to happen and it's going to happen. Whereas maybe a playground development, we may be looking to involve the neighborhood that playground's being built in. And on page 12, when we explain what involve means, there's a higher level of commitment for engagement there. So again, this is a real procedure. It's a strategy for staff, for our communication staff, to work closely with the subject matter expert to truly understand the project, the key messaging, and the best way to consult and engage. And this strategy provides that corporate approach. So every department should be moving forward with this in mind as they move their projects forward.
I just have two more comments, Mr. Mayor. So Jessica, you've alluded to my next point, which is around potential for bottlenecks. And you and I both took a similar course, or the same course, in fact, through the University of Waterloo on economic response to COVID-19. And you'll be familiar with the concept that in communication, oftentimes perfection is the enemy of the good. And I'm curious whether you've given any thought, or whether Dana had given any thought to some canned responses. My concern for this level of procedure when it comes to communication is the bottleneck that may exist when the approval levels are so high in the organization, and we may be sort of stranded waiting for communication based on approvals from higher levels. So I'll leave you with just sort of a hope that you will consider developing some pre-approved messaging for various circumstances, in particular ones that involve emergencies, such as the one we recently faced. And then lastly, I would, much like Councillor Grace alluded to earlier, a couple of points that stood out that are very worth highlighting. There's reference to meaningful contribution, and that the community members actually develop alternatives, not from a predetermined range of options. I particularly found that to be, I'll say, a moving message in light of some of the campaigns that I've been a part of. I think that it's very impactful that members of our community who are being sought out to participate in various forms of engagement have the opportunity to develop that strategy. And then lastly, Taylor White, who is a member of our waterfront ad hoc committee, deserves the utmost respect for her participation, despite having, or in relation to having an infant participate with her. So the fact that you have referenced equity and inclusion and the potential provision of childcare so that individuals can have the opportunity to participate without the barriers of childcare is second to none. I appreciate that inclusion wholeheartedly, and I know members of this community with small children will also respect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I saw Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great document, Jessica. It's well thought out. It takes into consideration a wide range of situations, but I think that the most important part is when it starts off as an engagement strategy instead of a communication strategy, because I think that a lot of people forget that the most important part of communication is listening. And when you do listen to people, the community, then you come up with better solutions and solutions that work for everyone. And even if you don't have the same opinion as them, you still get an opportunity to let them be heard. The one thing I have noticed in doing this over the last little while is that when people speak to you and you agree with them, they think you're open, honest, transparent, and you're making great decisions. And when people communicate with you and you disagree with them, then you're closed-minded and you're doing things in back rooms. So, but as long as we create engagement, then we're going to create customer service with the administration and the community. And as soon as we do that, I think that we're going to have a great relationship both with council and with the community at large. So thanks for all the work you've done. I think it's an awesome document.
Councillor Schreyer.
Thank you, and through you, Jess, I think it's a great document. I think it's a great report and a great strategy. I like that it identifies some of the challenges and then the proposed solutions that we face. I think streamlining for our municipality, but for all of our departments is so very important. It does create efficiencies and standards for all of the departments or the project managers or expert subject matters, as you refer to them. I know that decision-making and consultation, especially with the public, it isn't simple. It's not cookie cutter. So I think that this strategy will do a great job of creating just a framework for our success and our administration. So I love the roles, the responsibilities, the breakdown of the processes, evaluating it, monitoring it. I think all of that is just so very, very good. And it will, I think you guys have done a bang up job on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a few comments, questions. Yeah, I think that anytime we, and I said that when Mr. Mann was speaking, anytime we can engage our community, create open, transparent government, then that's what we're here to do, I believe. And the more open and transparent, the better. Engagement. There's one comment about the engagement levels via decision-making matrix, and I would be I'd be interested in at some point taking a look at how the decisions will be made in terms of when community members are engaged and when they're not engaged. I think it's important that, I mean, staff, using this as their planning tool, but I believe that this council needs to be very cognizant of this is the document where we're talking about community engagement, that let's make sure that we maintain open, transparent government where decision-making procedures are put in place, something we can quantify and qualify it, and so that people are engaged. And this is the whole purpose of the report. I understand that, but I think it's important that I think that matrix is important, deciding who's going to be engaged and who's not. On page 19, Jessica, I'm just wondering, cost-wise, you're talking about training for management with this community engagement process. You say that all management level staff should participate in mandatory why we consult training. And you also talked about all communication staff should take the IAP2 foundations and public participation. So you also say in number 3, internal communications, in order to educate staff and the public engagement, the town should create resources. Why the 3 shoulds? Why, I guess those are 3 questions around. Well, why is it not important that we let's do it versus we should be doing it? What are some of the costs around training for communication staff? When you say communication staff, how many communication staff do we have? You say communications plural. Who are you talking about there, Jessica?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The word should would be purposefully selected, just pending budgets, pending training schedules, pending costs. So we went with should. It is certainly a recommendation, and we would like to see staff trained. So the first item, training for management. So this would be training that would be done in-house. We're suggesting that the project managers, subject matter experts, really should be trained in this. They will be trained. I think it's critical that they are trained and that they understand the strategy and learn about the why we consult training. If you remember, if you participated in the sessions last year when we did the consultation on the consultation strategy, there was a bit of a breakdown and there was some training on why consultation matters. That was kind of a earlier summary of some further discussion that I believe is important to have with staff to understand the value and the impact of doing community consultation and engagement. Item 2, training for communication staff. We have one communication specialist, Dana Van Allen, who's covering a maternity leave for Laura Mosconi. So we do have one communication staff, and the IAP2 Foundation in public participation. I haven't taken this course. I know a number of people in my network who have and have said it's incredible. This is a fantastic international association of public participation training to truly understand, again, the importance and the how and why we consult. So the recommendation, again, pending budget and training schedules, is a should. Staff should take this training, we believe. And thirdly, the internal communication resource. Again, I think there's a real opportunity here to share with all individuals in the organization this theory on public consultation and public engagement. I believe it doesn't matter what position you are. If you work for municipal government in any capacity, it's good to understand that there's room for public consultation and public engagement in projects and in decisions. So I think this is a broad conversation. I think it's a great opportunity for all of our staff should we be able to do that. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that answers your question.
You know, you've explained the shoulds, there's costs associated. They just, as a follow-up, the IAPT Foundations and Public Participation course, Jessica, where does it operate out of? Is it a week long, a month long, a 6 month long? Is it online? How costly is a course like that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Vice Deputy Mayor, I haven't looked recently. I believe it's probably shifted with COVID. I wouldn't be surprised if it's offered online. Last time we had looked into this, our communication specialist, Laura Mosconi, who is our full-time permanent employee, she was interested in looking into this program, and I believe it was a 3 or 4 day program.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't quite quote.
No,
the
that's
cost.
fine. I didn't know whether it was a 3 month, 6 month, or just a short course. So
No, I believe it's a short
that's good.
course.
Thanks for the explanations.
Okay, further questions or comments? Well, thank you very much, Jessica, for your presentation for this strategy. It's an excellent strategy, and I just wanted to echo what Councillor Grace said about the one set of when to use it rules on open houses and public meetings. I think suggesting that you should not use an open house if emotions may run high is probably not where we want to be, I think. And I got me thinking that maybe there's some room in here to think about the skill level and comfort level of the people of the subject matter experts and the people who are tasked with running these, whatever the consultation is. A certain individual can handle a large, contentious public meeting, and others will have more difficulty with that. And it isn't, I don't think, necessarily wrong to say, what is the best form of engagement for the staff member involved to get to hear from the public and to get that input. So because I think because a contentious public meeting is possible, it can be managed and it can be useful. Yeah. And it shouldn't necessarily be an absolute no-go, I think.
Mm-hmm. If I could just add to that, Mr. Mayor, that page 28, where that's open house public meeting at town hall, where it speaks about topic being overly controversial, that line and that section, if you flip the page back one, you'll see that's in the inform category. So I share that with the group again, inform being if it's a project that we are going to do regardless. Sure. Perhaps. So I think that's why that's in there, but certainly we have heard that message and we will consider, we will make some of those changes. Absolutely. So great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. It's an excellent report. So you've all heard the recommendation and I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. So that moves then to 7.3, Infrastructure and Development Report on the Model Home Agreement for the Southampton Golf and Country Club and the Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This report is for a model home agreement with the developers of the lands just south of the Southampton Golf Course. This model home will allow one block of 5 townhouses to be built without the subdivision being registered or serviced, which will allow them to show potential purchasers what the product would look like and be able to sell them.
Thank you. There's a recommendation that we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council pass a bylaw to authorize a model home agreement with the Southampton Golf and Country Club. Are there questions and comments from members of the committee? Councillor Mayette. Oh, that went badly wrong. Anybody else have a question or comment? While we wait for Dave to figure out that he pulled the plug up. There he is. Dave, you're back. Me? Yes.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. We can.
All right. I just going to ask, I looked at the report and I see the overview of the Southampton Golf Course project. Do we have an idea of which lots are going to be utilized for the model home? Are they going to be the ones right on Division Street, or the ones facing the highway, or do we know that yet?
Through Mr. Mayor, I do not know that, but my experience would be they'll put the ones close to Division Street so that it's easier to see, because they don't want to have to build that road on the way in. So my expectation is one of the blocks on Division Street.
Okay. That's all I needed to know.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? I don't see any, so you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, and then that moves us on to Community Services, Parks and Recreation, and a staff report on the Lamont Sports Park Business Plan and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, staff have been working closely with Sports Turf International and the Lamont Sports Park Advisory Committee in getting to this stage. This made-in-house Lamont Sports Park Business Plan has included a number of elements, such as a synopsis of the existing bulk, projected capital phased-in approach to construction, estimated revenue and cost to the park, estimated one-time costs of opening the park, and scheduling capacities and considerations. The phased-in capital budget recognizes a primary as well as a Class C, which can be defined as a low and high cost rating that provides about a 25% fluctuation. The budget also includes design approvals and project management and contingency at 30%. Although somewhat higher than the suggested consultant recommendation of 30%, it reflects a more consistent construction cost experience in our local climate. The plan encourages a pinwheel construction. However, 2 diamonds were also identified for Council's information. I can appreciate that Council has been anticipating this plan. However, future steps that should be considered moving forward should include a potential pause on funding until the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Programming funding has been announced, proceed with further defined preliminary drawings for infrastructure phase that would include further investigation to preferred irrigation methods, a more detailed timelines if proceeding for construction, a detailed funding model, as well as validation of budget numbers. At this point, there is no financial impact. Thank you.
Okay, I'll read the recommendation, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that Council receive the Lamont Sports Business Plan prepared by Community Services staff. Questions or comments from members of the committee? The Deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, it's been a long time in coming that this report's finally made its way to Council. In that vein, I'd like to thank all the members of the committee that put in the work to get this to us, and all the members of the community who've been asking where we're at with this. I hope that Council will receive this tonight and look at the next steps, as our director has just mentioned. What we need to do is move this project along. We have a couple projects in queue that are coming, and it's very, very important that we finish at least one of these projects before we move on. I'm referring specifically to finish the Lamont Sports Park Phase 1, 4 diamonds, before we get into and looking at our pool construction. Those are 2 major projects, probably the 2 biggest recreational projects that this town will undertake in its history, I would say, and we can't have the 2 overlapping. So with that, I would like to ask, make a recommendation to our Director of Corporate Services, that if she could take a look at the numbers, see what we have in our legacy fund, what debt financing would look like. And as Director Jagielowski said, we have to wait until our grant application comes in, because that really tells us where we're going to be at, if we have any money or all the money or some of the money. It's very important, but I would like to have those numbers come forward. We know that we're looking at around $5 million to bring in the infrastructure. You know, the road is a long road coming in off of the concession, bringing it in, water. But the 4 diamonds itself are going to be phenomenal. They're all lit, which changes the way that we'd be doing ball, because now we have more time to play the games. We can go a little later. We're in a secluded spot, which is good. So if our director could come back with what we have in our legacy fund at this point, what it would look at for debt financing, should we have to call on all or part of it. And at that point, if there's anybody that has any questions that the director or myself or Councilor Schreyer couldn't answer, I'd be looking forward to any of them.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments? Councilor Smith.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a few questions this evening. First is on page 5. There's reference to the total registration numbers. I noticed that this number does not factor in any fastball outside of minor ball. So this would include men's, ladies, and there's a senior men's league. Nor does it include blast ball or the fall ball that takes place, the co-ed fall ball. Though conceivably, you know, even those 200 to 400 additional registrants that would be included in those numbers don't significantly impact the 9.5% of our population. I'm curious why they were left off of this report.
My understanding is that we did reach out and not all of those numbers were provided to us. And some of the smaller groups, we wanted to focus on some of the larger groups that had a larger impact in making the decision process. But I do know we did reach out to some of those groups, and unfortunately we didn't get that information.
That's interesting. So just through you, Mr. Mayor, I represent one of those groups, and I did follow up with 3 of them, all of which did indicate that they submitted numbers directly to staff. So if you could amend those numbers to include the fulsome registration numbers in Saugeen Shores, I would appreciate it. Next, on page 13, reference to the use of porta potties. I'm hopeful that this is a discussion that we'll hear throughout, or a theme that will be mentioned throughout. The community is well aware that there was intentions for porta potties to be a temporary solution at Beaner Ball Diamond, and here we are many, many years later, and we still have porta potties as the washroom facilities at that diamond. My concern with using this temporary solution is that it will remain a temporary solution for years and years to come. We have billed this facility as a world-class facility, and that's certainly not something I intend to have porta potties as a part of a world-class facility. So I hope that we can look to the future phases and perhaps the fundraising committee to come up with the funds necessary to make that happen in an earlier phase. I don't think there's a real question there. I do have a question on page 18 regarding staffing. So there's reference to an additional summer student required. Are there no efficiencies to be gained in this by way of having multiple the sole source of our ball diamonds being in one location and not traveling? I know there's a considerable amount of time spent by your staff, Jane, in grass cutting alone, transporting the equipment from location to location. Would there not be cost efficiency savings from a staff perspective in this model?
Keep in mind that the entire complex is indeed that a complex. So it's not just going to be ball facilities that are there. There'll be also the surrounding property that we'll need to maintain. Currently, we do have staff that work evenings now that you are right, that rotate from diamond to diamond. This will be an added increase. So definitely there's going to be some added staff that are there that our preference is, and certainly a trend that we've seen in complexes across Ontario that we've investigated, that staff are there permanently during the evenings, more for monitoring and ensuring washrooms and garbage are collected. That's not something that we provide at our other diamonds right now. I could maybe, in reference to your previous comment too, although not a question, I can provide some feedback on the washroom facilities, and the deputy mayor may also want to jump in. It certainly was a discussion during our meetings, but however, preference was to get the ball diamonds built first. Certainly we'd love to see washrooms built at the same time. We were cognizant of the dollar value on the structure that was preferred by the committee. And as I said, preference was diamonds first. And in the report, you'll also see that I indicate that those amenities can be included throughout the phases when it's deemed necessary and when there's a demand as well.
I appreciate that comment. I guess I'll leave it with one final remark, and that's in the initial, actually in your report, the preface, there's mention that this report has not been thoroughly validated, and I'm quoting, and I'm wondering if you can help me understand what is meant by that comment, that it has not been thoroughly validated.
So we're utilizing the numbers that have been given by our consultant, Sports Turf International. Although we certainly agree with the numbers, we like to look at some further investigation and possibly bringing in a costing consultant to review those numbers to make sure that they are applicable to our climate here.
So, and through you, Mr. Mayor, last comment, at what point in the process does that take place?
That could certainly start taking place within the next few phases as we anticipate waiting for the funding announcement to happen. There's a number of amenities or a number of steps that could happen as identified in my speaking notes when I presented to you. So it would make sense that that happens as we're waiting for the funding announcements to happen.
Thank you.
Further comments, Councillor Grace, then Councillor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jane and committee. I just wanted to clarify something on page 11 and 12. in the description of the phased-in approach to construction. It has the two categories of primary and Class C. Am I right from your previous comment in understanding that this is really just a cost fluctuation? You're predicting a range of costs, that it doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the construction?
Correct.
Or the features involved? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I also think it's an excellent report, and I congratulate the authors and the committee that worked on it. I was particularly pleased to see that there is, in fact, somewhat of a proposed or a contingency for a phased-in approach where we could have 2 diamonds built initially, like two leaves on the 4-leaf clover, so to speak. If that was the way that the funding trickled down from on high. And the other thing, the question I had was, I do drive by there just about every day, if not a few times a day, as I live on that road. And I've noticed a tremendous pile of topsoil develop on the site. Is that part of the work that the town is doing, or is that still the previous owner doing remediation work to turn it back into green space?
That's part of what we are doing. It's being transported there from other projects within the municipality and will be used for the future ball diamonds.
All right, so we're stockpiling as we have it come available. That seems like a prudent thing to do. Thank you.
Okay, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments and a few questions. First questions, Jane, with the property rezoning, it's my understanding that the property is yet to be rezoned and that the quarry permit is yet to be surrendered and transferred to the town. Is this correct?
Yeah,
and can you give me the timing around that? Maybe Amanda then?
Yeah, I was just going to say we're in the process of removing the pit license. Amanda can probably provide us some information on the dates.
Sure, and through you, Mr. Mayor, the pit license request has been put into the ministry right now by Sutherland's to remove the license. The pit is no longer active. They're not using it at all. And we have the zone change application coming on July 20th.
Oh, good.
So
Good.
Work at the ministry has changed to a 1-window system. So I can't tell you how long it's going to take at the ministry, but we're in good shape to be moving forward, and the license will be removed before we start.
Oh, that's good.
This spring.
That's good. Good to know. Good news, and it'd be a son of a gun if the rezoning didn't happen. That probably wouldn't be a good thing. I'm just wondering, Jane, on page 15, you speak to the water supply, and will Lamont Sports Park be maintained with Town of Saugeen Shores treated water, or will water be taken from groundwater source, or a combination thereof? Do you see, and in connection with that, if wells are to be drilled, when will that testing take place to see if we can in fact take water from a groundwater source?
So that testing can take place within the next coming months. And as I indicated previously, as far as next steps, part of that investigation will be determine what makes sense, whether it's wells or we're pulling from town water supply. Or a combination of both, as you had indicated. So those decisions have not been made, but certainly there is allocation for those decisions to be made. And this provides us, as I indicated previously, we wanted to give you this plan. You were anticipating this plan. We recognize that there's still a number of things that need to be done. And that's certainly one of those as we continue to move forward and wait for the funding announcements.
Okay, thanks for that. And I mean, it's a good news project. I mean, when you talk about numbers in 2010 going from 635 to 1,300 in 2020, I mean, that's 100% increase. And our population, Jane, in your report, you mentioned the Saugeen Shores is to go to 23,000 people by 2041. Those numbers of ball diamonds requirements we're going to have today and in the future is not going to go down. And so Councillor Mathis, or Vice Deputy, or Deputy Mayor, I should say, Mathis talked about the 4 diamonds, and Monteith Brown Planning Consultants made it very clear there was a need for those. 3.5 in your report you indicate. but those numbers, in my view, are just going to continue to go up with their increasing population. I just want to, I guess, move right over to costing, and then I want to talk a little bit about the next steps. But you know, when I see 2.3 million and $800,000 in A and B aggregate, you know, one of the things I liked about when we purchased Lamont Sports Park, Mr. Mayor, was, you know, that there was a lot of aggregate being left on site for our roads and our parking lot. And when in conversation with Mr. Sutherland, when that transaction was happening, he said, Mike, you got lots of aggregate there to build your roads and your parking lot. Well, that's good news. And and now I'm seeing $800,000 in the budget for A and B aggregate. So that number surprised me a little bit. I think I talked to Jane today about this, and Frank Burrows, I believe it was, and they, you know, exercising the side of precaution, I guess, and put a high number in, and hopefully this thing will come well under budget. And that's still my hope. I want to believe that the numbers are inflated. There's $600,000 in the budget for project management and contingencies. And I guess, Jane, one of the questions I had is Steve Hardy, who's been doing a great job for the town as project manager, former director of Parks and Recreation Listowel, engineered a couple of, at least one, I think 2 or 3 maybe, park redevelopment projects where he was the, you know, right front and center, and knows a whole lot about reconstructing, rebuilding ball diamonds. So will Steve Hardy, our current project manager for several projects, is Steve going to be heavily involved with this project as project manager, or are we going to have to hire an outside project manager for this?
Steve will be involved with the project, not necessarily part of project management, as it will be dependent on what other projects we're doing as well. He is, I remind you that he's not full-time with us, as much as we would wish he was. So there's a lot of unknowns with that. Certainly Steve will be part of it, no different than what he is with other projects that we do with outside contractors. So there's always a conduit between the municipality and the contractors. So I'm not going to commit right now that Steve is the project manager, but certainly involved with the project. Okay.
I guess the point I just wanted to leave with you, though, is that, you know, we've got a person on staff, and Steve Hardy, who's done a great job with project management, he has done projects like this. So if there's a way to engage Steve Hardy and add a day, maybe he's not interested, but I think it could be a whole lot less expensive if we hired our own project manager internally than having to go outside. So I just want to leave that with staff. I'm sure there'll be a recommendation on that in the future. But one of the recommendations I disagree with is, you know, with the fundraising committee, limiting them to 6 months. I think there's going to be fundraising far beyond the first phase. I think there's going to be fundraising for trail systems, for playgrounds, for maybe beach volleyball someday, for a picnic shelter, a washroom, an announcer's booth. I would not limit this committee to 6 months. I don't like it in the report, and I think it should be removed from the report personally. I think we're tying their hands. Fundraising campaigns can take a fair length of time, and I know the objective here is to stay away from the pool fundraising campaign. I think they should stand on their own. I think that the pool campaign people are passionate about raising funds for the pool campaign. I think there are 1,300 ball players in this community that are very passionate about raising funds for the ball complex. Some will overlap, no doubt, but I believe that there are 2 campaigns here that can stand on their own 2 feet. And I know you've talked about donor fatigue. I get that, Jane, I understand that. But I don't think, Mr. Mayor, we should be limiting this new fundraising campaign team to 6 months. I think we'd be, as a matter of fact, I think we'd be making a mistake. I think there's just far too many funds to be raised for that park. So I would hope that 6 month doesn't remain in the report. That would be my recommendation. The other thing I want to talk about is the RFP. There's really no recommendation. We're receiving the report. I think the recommendation tonight, let me just read it again. I think it's receiving it, is it?
Yeah.
Is it receiving?
Yes.
I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, we should be, you know, to move the process along the RFP or the tender document, final design drawings. I'm not convinced we should be waiting for the provincial federal government to make an announcement whether or not we're getting funding for Lamont Sports Park. We could be 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, who knows? I mean, the announcement could come down next month. We didn't get the funding. We have to find alternate sources of funding. I think we should be turning staff loose and directing staff to go ahead with the tender doc. We don't have to accept the tender document. We don't have to say we're spending all those dollars, but let's not lose another month or 2 or 3 with the planning process. I don't think there's any harm in going out to tender once we get the design drawings done. Let's move forward with those detailed design drawings based on, I think our deputy mayor's right. Base our detailed design drawings on 4 diamonds to start. And let's not delay it any further. So I don't know where we want to go with that today, Mr. Mayor, but I just think we should be directing staff to proceed with RFP for design drawings and then move forward with tender document in the fall. So that would be my hope for this process. Anyways, I'll leave it at that for now.
Sure. I just want to make the point on your previous point about the fundraising. So we're receiving the document tonight, but we also have a committee struck, as you know, to come up with a plan, fundraising plan, and they'll be bringing us that plan. And that plan, you know, maybe for a 6-month plan or maybe 1 year. I don't know what it'll be. The committee will decide what it needs to be, and council will decide to approve it or not. And that will, I think, determine what the campaign looks like, not this document. So this, I think, I mean, this is giving a broad outline, I guess, at this point, but it doesn't set anything in stone. Council will do that when it approves the plan.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. The 6 months is in the report, but I would encourage our Councillor Schreyer. I know that she's worked hard on putting together the fundraising plan, and Councillor Schreyer, I would encourage you to at least consider the 6 month time frame. I really don't believe it's long enough. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Further
If I may.
comments?
If I may, Mayor.
Yeah, the director.
Through you, I just want to make reference to the fundraising statement in that, and the deputy mayor and Councillor Schreyer may also chime in with this as well. But preference was through the committee to do phase 1 and 2, which was a ball diamond, and the fundraising reflects the for only those those phases. The additional amenities certainly would be further fundraising campaigns in order to have those part of the overall plan. So I just wanted to clarify that. Hope that makes sense.
So I saw Councillor Schreier's hand, so we'll get Councillor Schreyer next, and I'll get Councillor Rich after that.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Jane's absolutely right. So we have had our initial meeting of our fundraising campaign, and our mandate at this point is actually just to develop the fundraising plan, and then there would be another committee that actually does the legwork and does the heavy lifting of the fundraising. So I agree with Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt with regards to not restricting either of those 2 committees with any time frame, because I think that they're very passionate and they have great ideas, and I think that we'll see that flourish. We'll be calling another meeting of that committee very soon, as now we have kind of the business plan, and this is something that we were waiting for, and the conceptual design. So I think that that's great. Jane, I just want to say thanks to you and everybody involved in this, and especially our committee. It was a great committee to sit on. Just a few questions, and I won't repeat what anybody else has said here tonight. They're all great conversations. Phase 1, you have, starting in 2021 in the spring, and then phase 2 in the fall of 2021, and then the play would actually occur on 2022. With Deputy Mayor Matheson's comments about maybe bringing a little bit more information back about if we get the funding, if we don't get the funding, and what's available in the legacy fund if we decide to do that. Do you see, and I think with Vice Deputy Mayor as well, turning staff loose, I guess, to use his words, on preparing tender documents, because that is such a long process, do you see that maybe we could start some of that preliminary work in the site servicing in the fall of 2020, and in case there are delays and that we're not pushing that 2022 start date to get us on those 4 diamonds?
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. We could start on that and be in that mode of readiness for the next steps. Absolutely.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much. So do you see it then where we would have 2 separate tenders or 2 separate RFPs for this process, or would you engage one company to do the site servicing and also the diamond amenities as well, or how do you see that shaping out? Because if we're talking 2 tenders, I think that's really going to increase the span of the project.
Yeah, I think we'll keep it on 2 tenders. Now, companies may apply for both if they've got capacity for that, but we'll keep it on 2 tenders and get the appropriate expertise for both of those tenders.
Great. And one further question, Mr. Mayor, through you. In the operating budget, there was a jump in the utilities of about $75,000 in 2022, which would be when that park would be active. What was that jump for? Because if we're not using other diamonds, that we currently have, how are those utilities going to change? And I get that, we're activating 4 lit diamonds, but when the operating budget of about under $6,000 for how many lit diamonds we have now, I'm just unclear as to that increase.
Yeah, well, thanks to Sports Turf International, these were some of the numbers that they provided for us. They broke it down per diamond. And again, with not having any irrigation right now on any of our diamonds, obviously that's going to be an added expense that we typically haven't had. So certainly it was, it's a concept, I'll say. We needed to start somewhere, and certainly Sports Turf International has provided us those numbers, at least for a jumping off spot. They may be high. It's a projection at this point, but it's difficult for us to compare right now because we don't have those amenities on any of our other diamonds.
Okay, and fair enough, for sure. I do think that there are some efficiencies that will be developed that maybe aren't highlighted in this plan for the operating budget, and I think a couple other fellow councillors had some concerns or questions with that as well. And I do agree that the 30% contingency on this project is fairly high for a project like this. I think that with our project management that we have and dedicated staff, that we would see this project being very, very well maintained and staying in budget, and that hopefully the inflated budget that we see in front of us perhaps would be kept to more reasonable and more appealing budget. But overall, it's great, Jane. I know you guys have done a ton of work with this. It was a great committee to sit on, and I'm excited. I think we should go as quick as what we can.
I have Councillor Rich next, and then I'll get the Vice Deputy Mayor. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great idea, great project. Healthy communities, trying to prepare for a growing community, and everything's really good about it. I think the one thing that everyone is hitting on in a slight way is about the cost, because they're trying to figure out, I think that Councillor Myatt, or Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt from talking about how we can make sure we position ourselves to do this in the most cost-effective manner. But they both brought up something that I've been thinking about, but I hadn't really researched very well. I remember when we approved this project, and the questions to you, Jane. I remember when we approved this project, not the project, but when we purchased of the land, that there was some part of that where Harold Sutherland was going to prep the land, and there was like we talked about, a lot of aggregate that was going to be there, and I'm not sure where that all fell down. I was wondering if you could get back to us and give us the agreement when we did purchase that, because I've looked for it. I've never been able to find the detail that I'm looking for. That because I know sometimes in your head you remember things differently, but my memory was that we were going to buy it and it was going to more or less be prepped, which I think would be a significant savings, and in the aggregate side and on land prep side, and I would hope that in turn helps push the cost of the project down in order to make it a lot more palatable and easier to attain for our community.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and Amanda may want to come on this conversation too, as she's been having conversations with Lamont's sports, the pit individuals. They were obligated to rehabilitate it to a level of standard, and that they have done. I know Amanda met with them about 2 weeks ago. I don't want to put you on the spot, Amanda, but did you want to share some of that information as far as rehabilitating it?
Sure, and thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Sutherland's was responsible to get the pit to a rehabilitation point to get rid of their license. They've done that in topsoiled, made the slopes 4-to-1 or 3-to-1, so they're safe slopes. Then there were 2 piles of material, granular A and granular B, that were left on site for our use. We used some of the granular A to fix River Road. We used some at the police station for the parking lot, but the majority of it is still there. They've also left some recycled asphalt product, which is very valuable. They've left some 3/4 stone as well, and then a lot of topsoil piles. So they have left it in the condition that we thought we would receive it in. Plus, they've been allowing us to bring more topsoil on, as Jane talked to before. So I think that they have fulfilled their end of that part of the agreement.
Okay, the Vice Deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This would be a good time to thank Rod from, the Club of Westlink, from Red Hawk Construction. I think there's been a lot of topsoil, I believe, that's been donated from the development out there, and has been stockpiled at Lamont Sports Park. So a good time to thank Rod. We appreciate what he did there. And there's another thank you I wanted to make, and I'm ahead in my notes, Jane, and my apologies for this. I wanted to thank you for the made in-house. Right at the beginning, you said this is a made in-house business plan, and I wanted to commend you for that. I think it's great to see staff preparing things like this in-house, and you've done a really, really good job preparing it, and have answered all our questions tonight. So thank you for the great job you did.
Okay, are there further questions or comments from members? I have a couple of comments and some things to consider. First, on the point of fundraising, I think I would be very keen to hear Councillor Schreyer from your committee sooner than later, frankly, on the state of play when it comes to fundraising. We have $500,000 worth of fundraising in this business plan, intended for a project to start in 2021. But the world is maybe not the most conducive place at the moment for large fundraising campaigns, and the municipality needs to ask itself whether it's a good idea, frankly, for it to be out beating the bushes for $500,000 right now. And if it is, if it's appropriate now, and if it isn't, when will it be appropriate, right? And what is the access to funding at the moment? And so I don't have the answers to that. I'm hoping your committee will. I think, as part of this business plan, we have $500,000 fundraising in there. We better think about that and have a good answer to that question in short order before we embark on going too far down the fundraising road. I'm very cognizant of a lot of good causes out there right now, and our need to maybe avoid stepping on them. So that would be, I'd be very keen to hear from the committee soon on that. On the question of sale of land, we see in here the recommendation on the sale, eventual sale of Cameron Park. I think it's recommended, I'm going to forget the year, but a few years from now, after this facility is up and running. I think that we're going to need to look at the sale of land to finance this project, and we should look at other lands that may be available to sell. I am generally not in favor of selling lands to support capital construction projects because land appreciates in value and construction projects depreciate in value. But I think in this case, if this is a project we're going to get done and that we're going to afford, we're going to have to do some of that, and we're going to have some surplus lands that we need to look at, and there may be some we can look at before construction starts, and we should do that. I'm also, I know the committee has some recommendations around Beaner Park and the future of Beaner Park. I would not like us to, through this process, pigeonhole the future of the Beaner lands. I think, I know the committee was interested in some future baseball uses there, but I think as we build out Lamont Park, it may not be necessary to have baseball in Beaner Field. And I think that there may be stepping back to the 50,000-foot view of the municipality and all of our various needs and all the various things we may need to do. Those Beaner lands may have other uses, more productive uses, particularly since we're building baseball diamonds at Lamont Park. So I think that's something that I wanted to put on the table because I'm not keen to see that necessarily set in stone at this point. I am glad to see that the Kraft Heinz money is in there and that there's a Kraft Heinz play feature in phase 1. think that's exactly what we wanted. And so that's important, and I appreciate seeing that in there. And so then the question of priority setting around money is an important discussion to have. And I understand the urgency and the desire to to move the Lamont Park forward soon. But I think it's important too to remember that first out the gate is maybe not necessarily the way that we should look at this in terms of this versus the pool project. And we need to balance those two projects and look at them, look at our capacity to finance them, and set priorities between the two of them. Remember, if we draw this money from the legacy fund, we will substantially push off that pool project, particularly if we do not receive federal or provincial funding, which is a strong possibility. And we need to, I think the deputy mayor is right. We need to get the director of corporate services before we do anything here to come back with a look at some scenarios as to what may happen. A scenario, say that if the pool project is funded by the federal provincial government and this project isn't, what does that look like? If this project is funded and the pool project isn't, what does that look like? And if neither project is funded, what does that look like? We have a limited borrowing capacity, and even if we had an unlimited borrowing capacity, we have a taxpayer who has a limited ability to pay interest and borrowing costs. So we need to be cognizant of that. You know, $5.7 million borrowed over even 20 years will cost $300,000 a year, which is a 3% tax increase. So you know, we need to consider how, and you know, if you draw that out, if you draw any portion of that out of the legacy fund, it will limit our ability to do other things with that money. Also remember, as I said, that with the fundraising situation, we're in a tough year. I would not be surprised if council for the 2021 budget year wants to see a 0% tax increase, which means you can't contribute to the legacy fund in 2021, which means that your legacy fund as projected will be lower than it was, than what the previous projections you've seen were, which will further push out your ability to finance pools or other things. So there are all these things to consider. And I think we need to have the Director of Corporate Services come to us and say, here are the things that you should consider. Here's what it looks like with a 0% tax increase in 2021 and funding the Lamont Park in 2021, and look at some of those different dynamics so that we can make an informed decision that sets priorities. Because I'll tell you this, if we're going to try to do the YMCA and Lamont Park, we're going to have to set some priorities. We don't have the capacity to do all that, so we need to figure it out. I hate to be a wet blanket, but I think we need to hear some of this information. I think there are solutions. There is a potential, for example, that I was considering of borrowing all of the $5.7 million and funding the interest and principal costs of that from the legacy fund, which may be a way, and through the annual contributions, which may be a way to fund it. So there's ways. I think there's solutions that can make that work, but we need to see them before we move forward with RFPs or anything else, so that we can be sure we're making the right call. So I'm hopeful that the director will come forward with that. But yeah, I appreciate all the work that the director's done on this business plan. It's a critical piece in terms of making decisions on this, and now we can move on to the next steps and figure out how we get it done. And I know we all want to see it done. All right. So if there's the deputy mayor.
Mayor, and through you, I'd ask our Director of Corporate Services if she could have that. Am I muted? Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you.
Oh, if she could have that report ready for us for our first meeting in August. I don't believe we have a meeting in the rest of July, but if she could have that for us, in August, we'd be able to make some decisions that go along with that. And at the same time, I'd like to remind council that when we did create the legacy fund, it was for any project. It wasn't just for the pool project. It was for any project that we're working on. So as you said, Mr. Mayor, there's lots to look at, but if we get those numbers for August, I think we can move on from there.
Yeah, I'm sure the administration can put that information together for us. And I know we've heard from members of council their keenness to see the RFP move forward. So it's possible we can see some information on all of that together and then decide how we want to proceed at that point. So if there is nothing further, then we have, so pardon me, I get back to my right page here. We have the recommendation. I already read it, so I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to 7.6, communications and petitions for committee of the whole action. And there is a petition letter there from the Port Elgin, from some residents of the Port Elgin tourist camp. And I'll just summarize, they're asking for a refund of, or a fee credit, I suppose, of $500 in lieu of time missed at the camp this spring. And so we can take direction. I would suggest referring it to staff, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that was going to be my recommendation that we refer this back to staff for a staff report and a recommendation. And but I did have a question for Jane, if I could, or a couple questions. Jane, our length of season here, does it go from May 1st to October 31st? And if so, I think that's correct. And if what do other campgrounds offer in terms of their months of service at a facilities around the province? And that's the first question. Secondly, have you reached out to any other municipalities, communities around the province to see if they're in fact refunding funds to their seasonal permit holders? And I guess the third question would be, are we doing anything for our residents in terms of, are we providing anything in lieu of this 1 month they've lost? Those are the three questions I had.
Okay, hopefully I answered them all for you. Our season is a true 6 months, so we go from May 1st to the end of October. What we historically find is that a majority of the camps close after the Thanksgiving weekend. So about the second weekend of October, we tend to go a little bit longer. And it's been that way for as long as I can remember. We have reached out to a number of campgrounds locally, as well as some of the larger ones provincially, to see how they have been operating. In total, I think we reached out to about 10. And out of that 10, one indicated that they were giving a very small refund as a gesture, a goodwill gesture. What we have done to date is that we have provided free garbage pickup for our residents. So we've waived the bag tags. I consulted with staff and they indicated that they did not see an increase in garbage based on 2019 to date. So the campers have been pretty respectful to that. And I'm sorry, did I have answered your questions or did I miss one there?
I think those were the three questions I asked. Okay. I suppose, Jane, if it's going back to Mr. Mayor, to Jane, if it's going back to staff for staff report, Jane, you'd be considering things like that then, an additional year of bag tags perhaps, or freezing rates for next year, or I guess you'll have some options in there and some recommendations from staff and things we might be able to do to help the cause, right?
Yeah, certainly we can come back with a staff report.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jane, for those answers that answered a couple of questions I had. One of the points in the letter is talking about the utilities running in the camps during the month of May. Did we have those utilities running throughout the month of May, the water, the electricity, any other kinds of services or expenses that were incurred? Do we know that offhand?
So we have expenses all year round, obviously, with the tourist camp even sitting empty. We delayed bringing our senior staff back to the tourist camp. I believe it was the first week of May, and at such time, we turned on all services. Typically, staff would have 6-week lead up in preparing for the campground. And this year they had, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. So part of their lead up is turning on those services, water, hydro, electricity. Electricity is on all year round, to be fair. Water, we turn it on when obviously the permafrost is just so that we can ensure that the pipes aren't going to freeze.
Okay, just a couple of follow-ups. So one of the points in the letter also was talking about those residents fear that the water lines, if things were left going until November 15th, that the water lines might freeze. Could you respond to that?
Yes, certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things when we originally provided the option of extending this season, we didn't give a date because of that reason. Certainly we know the weather can be unpredictable, as it can be in May. There's been times when we've had to clear snow off the roads in preparation for them to come in the first week of May. So that has always been an issue. I've reached out to a number of other camps who have provided that option, and it is particularly beneficial for, I'll say, snowbirds. I can tell you today we had one snowbird family arrive who have not been able to get into the country. They're required to be here for 6 months. So for those individuals, it will be beneficial that they have a place to stay until they head south again.
Okay. Just,
Yep.
During the month of May, what is the usual occupancy rate?
That's a good question, and we're in a little bit different situation than we are our other surrounding campgrounds because we don't monitor our entrance and access into our campgrounds. Southampton, obviously, it's impossible to do with 3 different campgrounds. What I did ask staff is historically May is very quiet, and what we tend to find is it is the snowbirds that come back because they want to be back for 6 months, so that's a small handful of people. And typically we would also find some weekenders that would come up and prepare their site for the oncoming season of coming back further in the summertime so that they can enjoy the warm weather. In some cases, some campsites remain vacant. People don't come until the end of June when school is out and they can come up with their families. So it's a real mixture that we see.
Okay, and one more, Mr. Mayor, if I may. So similarly, at the end, until the end of October, and I think you partially answered this, but do you have a sense of how well populated the camps are until the time when campers are eligible to be there till the end of October?
It's certainly a demographic. It's the older adults that tend to stay right to the end. We have people that come the first day and they leave the last day. Obviously, families aren't typically here, but some of the comments that I know staff have received is that a few families have said it makes it a little bit easier for them to come back and clean up the leaves at that time as opposed to feeling rushed and doing it earlier in the season.
Thank you.
Okay, are there further comments on the petition? I would just say that I'm keen to see if we do get a report back from staff on this, that information on what other campgrounds, particularly the private campgrounds in the town of Saugeen Shores, are doing. I'm not at all in favor of surpassing what they're doing. I think we don't want to put them in a difficult situation, and I think we should try to stay in line with what other facilities in our community are doing. And it's also important to remember, and it's often, I think, not noted, that we really are providing a 12-month service at the tourist camps, in that we are storing the property of these folks on our property for 12 months of the year. So our lease is really a 12-month lease in practice, and not a 3 or 4 month lease. And so the idea that they receive no service from us and are entitled to a refund for that period is, well, I can't agree with that. So I think we'll need to, we'll hear back what the director says, and I'm keen to stay in line with what our, I don't want to use the word competitor because I hope we're not competitive, but our fellow trailer park operators in Saugeen Shores are doing. So is there a resolution to refer this petition to staff? Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, second by Councilor Grace. All in favor? That's carried. So that moves us then on to communications for information. Are there any questions or comments to any of the communications for information? I don't see any. So that moves us then on to my report, which is there for your information. And then item 9, the report of department heads. We have the information report on 2019 waste diversion. Does the Director of Infrastructure have any comment to make to that?
Sure. I'd just like to highlight that we're staying constant through you, Mr. Mayor, when it comes to recycling, that we have 15 years on the landfill. So later in August or September, you're going to see the waste management master plan, and those recommendations are going to help us get to that 15 years, extend the life, and then what we do after that point in the landfill.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for the Director? Vice Deputy Mayor?
It was just a comment, Mr. Mayor, through you to Amanda, and to pass on to your staff, Amanda. I think the fact that there's still a life expectancy of same as 2018 is, is a testament that they're doing a great job out there, and I use it to pretty regular basis. And I just wanted you to pass on our thanks for them doing a great job out there.
Will do.
Thank you. All right, why don't we move then on to the item 2, the information report on the YMCA partnership and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. And through you, the report certainly gives us a good synopsis of where we are right now. The CEO from the YMCA and myself had done a considerable amount of work prior to COVID. And I suspect, based on the announcement today of phase 3 opening up, they will be extremely busy at the YMCA, but we will be diligent in reconnecting and coming back to you within the next several months to present a partnership agreement for Council. I remind Council that this project was submitted for consideration as well for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, as you are aware.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for the Director? I don't see. Oh, Councilor Smith.
Yes, I have a question. We continue to hear this term that we will see a report in the coming months. I'm wondering, Jane, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we could perhaps set a date. As the saying goes, what gets measured gets done. And I'm hopeful that we could put a milestone date in place. And then if there is justification, and certainly COVID would be one of those reasons, we could push if necessary. But I think it's important that we and the community have a date with which to target. Is it possible, and perhaps David wants to chime in on whether we could have a date, a milestone date for the next activity?
Yeah, thank you, through you, if I may. So working with the CAO from the YMCA, one of the problems or issues is that it's not necessarily our council that approves it, but it's also their board of directors as well. Their board of directors has been paused since COVID, and I have not been told of a date when they are reconvening. So they're certainly part of this process as well. I hope within the next coming weeks, working with Gail again, we'll be able to give you a more definite date that we can certainly bring something back.
Okay. Any other questions on this one? I don't see any. So then that moves us on to the final one, which is from the Director of Corporate Services. Oh no, sorry, the Treasurer on the year-end 2019 financial stats report. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As stated in the report, the annual audit process performed by BDO has been delayed until the end of this month due to the impact of COVID-19. Staff regularly review financial performance, and there are no known significant problems in our 2019 results. Staff project that there will be a surplus from our 2019 operating activities, and we will have an overall net positive transfer to our reserves. Staff will present detailed 2019 financial information at an August meeting, and will ask for council approval on reserve transfers in line with town policies at that time. And I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm also happy to take any feedback prior to the next report regarding any specific details that council would like to see included.
Okay, any questions or comments for the treasurer? I don't see any. Looks like you're off the hook, Daniel. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
And then that is the end of our agenda. So we'll do a quick announcements by members and the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take this opportunity to thank our residents and our visitors for socially distancing and being respectful on the beach. Our town staff has done a wonderful job of cleaning the beaches and making them an inviting place. So thank you to everybody, and please keep it up. We have an announcement coming sometime this week, and we'll move on with that. But thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to commend you for how well you spoke at the annual meeting for the Southampton Residents Association Zoom meeting last Saturday morning. And it was a good meeting and well organized. And I just wanted to also congratulate Bill Bowden for doing a great job facilitating that meeting. I thought it was well done, some good information shared, and some good questions online that were answered very well by you and others. And I just wanted to commend you for the great job you did.
Thank you. I had help from Councillor Rich. Up next, we have Councillor Schreyer.
Thank you. And through you, just to maybe build on what Deputy Mayor Matheson had said, just to thank everybody, visitors, residents, business owners, everybody in Saugeen Shores. I've been to a few of the different beaches, been to establishments, and I think that everybody, for the most part, is being patient. And I think patience is the main thing right now. As phase 3 got announced today as well, it doesn't mean that everybody is ready to go because we're told that we can hit go. It will take time for our local businesses and our municipality, our town staff, in order to open up some of these services with the increased numbers. So I think patience is the most important thing right now. So I do thank everybody for that.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'd just like to take a moment as we approach phase 3. There's some great news on the horizon for a number of our fitness organizations in town that they will be able to open. But it's not lost on me, and I'm sure many other members of the community, that these fitness facilities have been offering programming virtually and in some cases at no cost for many, many months. It comes to mind that Lakeshore opened their tennis courts up for a number of months to let individuals use those to stay physically active, even when things like our playgrounds weren't available for folks. So I wanted to take a moment to recognize them, as well as I see Bloom Meta Yoga and Wholeness is offering classes on the beach and in parks. This is certainly something, there's programming to be had in the community. There's a number of fitness and ways to be active in our community that I think our community members appreciate. And I hope we continue to support them as they open back up.
Thank you. Councillor Grace. I should have been Rich, but I went Grace first. I'm losing. You guys have been gone too long. I can't remember where you sit anymore. Councillor Grace.
Okay. I wanted to add to the Vice Deputy Mayor's comments about the Southampton Residents Association meeting on Saturday morning, and to make special mention of an initiative that they are sponsoring. It's a fundraiser for the hospital, which has seen a significant drop in its fundraising abilities because of COVID-19. And so the Residents Association has come up with a creative substitute for the golf tournament that they usually sponsor every second year, with the money going specifically to the hospital foundation. They're doing a virtual golf tournament so that if you donate certain amounts, for instance, $1,000, you could get a hole-in-one certificate. And other varieties of recognition for participation at different levels. They'll also have awards, real awards with a virtual award ceremony. So you can participate, started on July 11th, which was this past Saturday, and runs until August 13th, which is the date when the real tournament would have been held in normal times. So please, if you can, support this. It's a really worthy fundraising project, obviously, with the donations going to the hospital. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Ridge.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, finally, the Southampton Residents Association has a golf tournament that I can actually participate in. Anyway, it was a great meeting on the weekend, and I just want to say thanks to all the people of our community, because the beaches have been really well attended, but everyone's doing a great job to make sure they stay open, and local businesses and the BIA are really thankful for all the business they're receiving. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything particular to report other than I hope people are staying safe and playing safe. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I was particularly saddened this past week to hear of the passing of Frank Saunders. He was a pioneer in the nuclear industry. He was a founder of Bruce Power, founder of the NII, and it was a great community member. And he will be sadly missed by everybody in the nuclear industry. And it was sad to see him go. So those that knew him were fortunate to have learned something from him. And I count myself as one of those people. Thank you.
Thank you. Me too, Councilor Mayette. And I would just report that I did send a note of condolence on behalf of the municipality to Frank Saunders' family. The Vice Deputy Mayor, do you have something to add there?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. I promised I would bring this up. I had a phone call from a young 8-year-old resident today, and said that you're the Vice Deputy Mayor. I said, correct. And she said, well, would you speak to the mayor about something that I think is really embarrassing? And I said, what's that? Well, there's graffiti. There's graffiti showing up at the skate park, and there's some garbage on the ground, and it's embarrassing. And would you please talk to the mayor about it? So I just wanted to say to you that there is graffiti showing up, unfortunately, at our skate park, and to the parents, guardians, supervisors, please be aware and keep an eye for us, for all of the community, on what's happening at our skate park. Some of it's maybe not so pleasant. So I said I would bring that up. I'd raise that point, and I have. So maybe the community can keep a watch for us. Okay.
Thanks for that. Why don't we see if we can get some action for that 8-year-old? Is the Director of Community Services still on the line? Jane, is there, are we noticing graffiti in the skate park? Is there anything, we're taking action on that?
That's the first report I've had, so we can certainly take action on that.
I have the pictures as well sent to me, but it's showing up. So
There
thank
you go. We're on it. All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Jane.
thanks very much, everyone. I wanted to just, well, I guess I wanted to make a comment just as we conclude about the upcoming mandatory mask order, which is pending from the Medical Officer of Health. He identified or indicated that that order would likely come into effect to coincide with the with the province's move to stage 3 of its reopening plan. Now we know when that will be, on July 17th. So I think you can expect Medical Officer of Health will, as he suggested, move along that timeline on the mask order. And the comment I wanted to make tonight is that I know many businesses out in our community are concerned about being in a position of having to enforce that order. They're the ones who are ultimately responsible for ensuring that masks are worn in their establishments. So the message that I have for every resident of the community is, let's not make it difficult for business owners. Let's wear our masks. Everybody wear a mask, and let's also be cognizant of the fact, as citizens, that some people won't be able to do it. Some people have asthma. Some people have other medical conditions that prevent them from being able to wear a mask. So if you see somebody in line at a local store who isn't wearing a mask, assume that it's for a good reason. Assume that that person is a good person who is doing their best, but simply can't wear a mask. And if we all focus on what we can do ourselves, if we wear our masks ourselves, if we can, and keep ourselves safe and do our best to keep other people safe, then that's the best we can do. And try to remember that it's a difficult thing for businesses and for some other residents. So do your best, wear your mask if you can, and let's make it easy on our local businesses who are having a tough time and are in this case in a bit of a difficult position. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Schreyer. All in favor? We stand adjourned. We'll reconvene at 8:35. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting and welcome everybody back. Second item is disclosures of pecuniary interest, and I'll ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest they'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime you need to. We have no additions or deletions. We have no public meetings, so that moves on to the adoption of minutes. And I will need a mover and seconder that council adopt the minutes of the council meetings of June 22nd, 2020, June 23rd, 2020, June 29th, 2020, and note and file the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of June 22nd, 2020 as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace, seconded by Rich. Questions, comments, additions, deletions to those sets of minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. All right, that then moves us on to reports of the committee of the whole. And the first one is a general government report regarding economic recovery. And I will need a mover and seconder that council of the town of Saugeen Shores adopts the general government report dated June 22nd, 2020 regarding the Saugeen Shores Strong Economic Recovery Plan. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Matheson, second by Mayette. Questions or comments of the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. That moves on to item 2, an infrastructure and development report regarding deferral of development charges. And I have a resolution that council of the town of Saugeen Shores adopts the infrastructure and development report dated June 22nd, 2020 regarding the deferral of development charges. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Grace. Questions or comments of the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. That moves us then on to item 3, Community Services Parks and Recreation Report regarding Lamont Sports Park concept plans and John Kyles Parkette designation. And I have a resolution that council of the town of Saugeen Shores adopts the Community Services Parks and Recreation Report dated June 22nd, 2020 regarding the Lamont Sports Park concept plans and the John Kyles Parkette. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Schreyer. Questions or comments of the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Then that moves on to reports of municipal officers. And the first is the Attainable Housing Task Force report. And I have a resolution that council of the town of Saugeen Shores accept the Attainable Housing Task Force report dated July 13th, 2020. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Grace. Comments to the report? Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say, I want to say a big thank you to Jay Posner, who's really played a big role in writing this report, and we've had great help from Jay so far with the Attainable Housing Task Force, and Sarah Wilson's our executive assistant on the committee, takes her minutes, does a great job. So thank you, Sarah and Jay. We've had a few things in our first few meetings happen, some good news stories. We've formed subcommittees for writing of a survey, community survey. We have a subcommittee that's working on some stakeholder meetings that are going to happen in the month of August with a total of 18 to 20 stakeholder groups will be contacted shortly. We want to hear from our stakeholder groups to see what's happening in their world in terms of where they feel we're falling down in the area of housing, what we can do better, what they're doing with like the Poverty Task Force, for example, whether it's the YM, so Family Y or United Way, et cetera, et cetera. Habitat for Humanity. So those stakeholder meetings will happen. And also there's a launch meeting that's going to happen sometime in August. And thank you to Bruce Power. They're going to be sponsoring our launch meeting with a mediator, a moderator, I should say. And that'll happen sometime in August, early September. So the survey, and this is where I want to reach out to the community to say a survey is coming. It's going to be done in-house. We've had a subcommittee prepared. Some great questions that we're going to be asking our community in terms of where they feel we're falling down with housing, where we need to do better, what housing stock we need to add, identify some opportunities and to increase the range of housing, et cetera, et cetera. And, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, that just a couple of comments here, but the high percentage of renters, over 44% actually, in the town of Saugeen Shores spend more than 30% of their income on shelter. And that's a high number as compared to around the province. And 43% of our workforce don't live in Saugeen Shores. So that's a number we would like to change. So the committee's doing well, and Councillor Grace has been amazing. And I think there's one thing we did pass, and I'd like to raise this evening, Mr. Mayor, is that we did approve a recommendation regarding secondary dwelling suites and secondary dwelling units. And I'm just wondering if that's something, perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I know you've been pretty passionate about moving that forward, and we did take it to the Attainable Housing Task Force 2 weeks ago. And you can see in the report from Jay here this evening and I about secondary dwelling units. So I'm not sure how you wanted to handle that to this evening. I certainly would be prepared to, whether this formally approves it or not, by approving this report or not. It's really not, there's no recommendation in here. So wish to report, we're just reporting. So I wasn't sure how you wanted to handle that recommendation of secondary dwelling units, Mr. Mayor.
What we have is a recommendation from our task force. So in order to finally implement changes to the zoning bylaw or official plan, obviously we need to do that in a planning meeting, and we need to have formal amendments to approve, and there's a public process. But I, as you have rightly pointed out, Vice Deputy Mayor, I'm keenly in support of this, and I think it would be appropriate, I think, this evening, if council saw fit and if there was somebody wanting to move it, for council to support in principle the recommendation of our task force and their recommendation. So if somebody wanted to move that, we could consider a simple resolution along those lines.
I certainly would move it, Mr. Mayor, if you can get a second for it, for sure, yeah.
So that's moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Grace, that council supports in principle the recommendation of the Attainable Housing Task Force. Are you clear on that resolution, Linda?
Yes, I'm clear on it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the resolution? I don't see any, so all in favor? That's carried.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just close by saying to the community again, this Attainable Housing Task Force, our whole main objective is to add new housing stock, whether they're tiny homes or laneway homes or geared income housing. We're working closely with Bruce County. We're working closely with the town of Blue Mountains, doing some great work over there. They formed an Attainable Housing Corporation. And you may be hearing a presentation shortly from members of our task force, maybe John Van Basselar, very interested in forming an Attainable Housing Corporation for our community. There are housing corporations around the province. They can do great things for a community. And so I just wanted to mention that. And to our residents, a survey is coming. A launch meeting's coming. There'll be stakeholder meetings are coming. And the larger scale, community forum, hopefully someday we'll be able to get back up in the Rotary Hall. We can get 100, 200 people upstairs to share their stories with us about the need for housing in this community. There are more people than not than we realize living on poverty. They can't afford the kinds of rents, can't afford the house prices here, unfortunately, that we need to help. And so we want to hear from those people. And I think this is the first message we want to send out is look forward to a lot more information over the next 4 to 6 weeks about affordable, attainable housing in Saugeen Shores.
Thank you. Are there any further comments to this resolution? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important to point out that the recommendation from the task force talks about the fact that through this process, through the official plan process, through the zoning bylaw discussion, that the process will create standards that are appropriate to Saugeen Shores. And that discussion will be made about how those secondary units can be constructed that are appropriate to our municipality. So, you know, this isn't, I know this can be a controversial issue. And it also talks about removing some of the restrictions on the construction of secondary dwelling units. It's important for the public to understand that this isn't a wholesale, unthinking adoption of this, that there are standards that are going to be discussed and approved that will be appropriate to our municipality.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's a planning process which will have to take place in which the public will have an opportunity to have input on whatever changes are proposed, which is key. But I think the resolution just passed by council should leave no doubt that although this will be controversial, allowing more secondary dwellings in the municipality is essential and has to be done. And though it may be controversial, it's not optional in my view. So this is council's endorsed what we have before us, and there will be a process, and we'll discuss it, and there will be standards and rules and regulations as always. But we will move forward with more affordable secondary suites in more zones across the municipality. So, is there any other discussion with regard to this? If not, I'll ask all there. That's carried. So that moves us then on to staff report on the 2020 asphalt resurfacing program. And I have a resolution that council authorizes EC King Contracting to be awarded the contract for the 2020 asphalt resurfacing project in the amount of $143,702.11 plus applicable HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Are there questions? Is there a mover and seconder first and foremost? Rich and Schreyer. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. That then moves us on to a staff report on Southampton standpipe upgrades and recoding, and I have a resolution that council authorized that C3 Industrial be awarded the contract for the Southampton standpipe upgrades and recoding project in the amount of $377,335.25 plus applicable HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Matheson, second by Rich. Questions or comments on the resolution? Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I read this report, and certainly it indicates the amount was budgeted for last year, and that this fund comes in under what was budgeted for the 2020 capital budget. But what it falls short of saying is that it will be funded through the water reserves and not through general taxation. Is that something that I can be assured will happen? Because obviously work on water infrastructure is supposed to be paid by water users.
Director.
Thank you. And through you, that's by law, so there's no option otherwise for this project. It's a user fee in our financial plan, and so therefore that's how it's funded.
And we're not going to use any gas tax money either then?
No.
Right.
I was going to say, unless we stumble across some extra gas tax money.
Enough.
Okay, so is there any other questions or comments to this resolution? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to the director. Do we know what the cost of this generator is that may be installed in the future?
Thank you. And through you, I don't at this time know the cost of that generator. We'll look at what comes back with that wastewater and water master plan And hopefully there's a budget item in there for that. But we're also looking at how we can back feed Southampton with pressure or from water from Port Elgin. So that may be a different way of doing the project without needing the generator. So if the standpipe goes down, then we would backfeed from Port Elgin and then the generator wouldn't be needed.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Okay, then that moves on to the final report, the staff report on the North Shore Road and Trail work. And I have a resolution that council authorized staff to proceed with a single source procurement for engineering of the North Shore Road and Trail erosions work with B.M. Ross and Associates Limited to be funded out of the NWMO fund with an upset limit of $50,000. Is there a mover and second? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Mayat. All right, questions or comments to the resolution? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank Amanda for the report. I think people are going to be pretty, pleased that there's some progress being made with the rehabilitation of North Shore Road, and there's already some work started. And so I wanted to commend Amanda for that. And I will be supporting this $50,000 single source. I think this, I'm not always in support of single sourcing, but I think this is the right time, the right place to do it. I took the liberty of visiting the town of Goderich a few weeks ago and looked at their shoreline work. They spent $1.3 million on rehabilitating the shoreline. They contracted BM Ross as the engineering firm. And now Amanda's discovered that Kincardine has used BM Ross to do similar work with Armour Stone and so on and so forth. So I think this is an opportunity perhaps to maybe even save our taxpayers some dollars with using an engineering firm for the third time, Goderich, Kincardine, now us. And I found out from Amanda today, I was discussing with her that there's some similarities, to the work. And so hopefully there'll be some, efficiencies there from a cost saving perspective. So I just wanted to thank you for the report, Amanda. I'll be supporting the $50,000. A question I did have, has the town, Mr. Mayor, I guess maybe you would know, or Amanda, is the damage that we suffered there on our shoreline, which will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, obviously, is it insurable at all? Like, are we able to claim any of that through our insurance company or not?
The director.
Thank you. And through you, I don't know the answer to that. I have looked at climate change funding and I haven't found a funding source for that yet, but I haven't looked into specific about insurance.
That's fine. I just thought that maybe the director of corporate services might want to research it, but there's obviously a lot of debt. The work at the top, the one-way road from south of Hilly Lane, Amanda, you see some one lanes where you have the stop light, the green light, red light each end sort of thing. There's not going to be something like that solar powered lighting. It'll just be like a single lane where, because there's a couple of bends there, right? Sight lines aren't that great. So I'm just wondering how will that happen when a car comes around a bend when the sight line isn't good and all of a sudden meets somebody halfway? What are you saying to me? How's that going to happen without lighting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's going to be a lane in each direction still open because we voted down the one way on North Shore. So it's what that single lane means is that when you're going through that section and a bicycle is in front of you, you may not pass the bicycle. So northbound and southbound, there'll be signage that shows a cyclist in the middle of the lane and signs that say do not pass.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the report. So thanks for that. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, I think I saw the Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to our director. The stone erosion at the base of the flag in Southampton, will that be included in this? Or is that something separate that will have to be looked at and addressed before the end of the summer season and having it ready for the fall winds?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a separate project. So Public Works staff is going to reset those stones by the flag under a different, I guess a different program. That's just maintenance work that we're going to do. Future work may be needed to look at that because of high weather or high water, but it's not part of this work that BM Ross will do.
So just our Public Works Department will be, sorry, Public Works or Community Services?
Through Public Works, we'll be moving and replacing the stones.
Okay, and we'll probably looking at that once the summer season is ended.
Through Mr. Mayor, it's Frank and Pete met last week, so it's in the queue for when Public Works can get to that work. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but it's between now and November.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to talk about when we're talking about this as a significant investment and protecting our shoreline. In the last couple of weeks, I've become aware of a situation that I did report to the director about somebody taking it upon themselves to alter the shoreline themselves to make a little better beach. And there have been examples of this through the years with people taking down trees or whatever along the shoreline. What are we doing, or can we do more as a municipality to remind residents that this is illegal behavior, and it threatens our natural shoreline? It ultimately may end up costing taxpayers more money if the shoreline is altered in these illegal ways.
Comments, the director?
Thank you, and I may rely on Jane a little bit for some of this answer as well, but the area in question is Crown land, so it's not a municipal right-of-way. Where it is a municipal right-of-way, we do charge people with mischief when they do that work. In this instance, the SVCA is going down to see if they've done anything against the regulation. So if you add fill to a beach area, then you can suffer the fines under that regulation. We went down to look to see how close the change is to the road and what it does to the compromising of the road. I'm going to see what SVCA comes back with, and then need to look further into legal advice as to what we do. It's not on our property, but affects our roads.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further? I have a couple of things on this one. The first one is just a point of concern about the SVCA involvement in this project. I think, the SVCA permitted this project 10 years ago, and then it eroded. And now they're back seeking another permit for us to fix the project that they permitted in the first place. I think it's unnecessary, redundant, and possibly in contravention or contradiction to their own policies. So I am reluctant, frankly, to see us pay for an SVCA permit for this particular project, particularly given the fact that we went to them, got it permitted, and then our infrastructure eroded. So I don't know why we're paying again to simply restore the infrastructure that we built with their permission. So I guess it is what it is. We need to proceed, and we want to get it done. But it certainly that permit will be paid for under protest by me for sure. The second thing is the NWMO fund requested in here. I support the recommendation. I just wonder, I'm reluctant to see us start to use the NWMO fund to pay for engineering for infrastructure projects. I think that we have other reserves. I mean, I think that the NWMO fund should be reserved for, I guess, maybe broader projects. It just doesn't feel right to me. I mean, it's hard for me to put words to it. It just doesn't feel like an appropriate use for the reserve. My preference would be to fund it from future capital or from tax stabilization. I mean, we have lots of reserves. We can certainly pay for this from reserve. I don't have any objection to that. I just rather not deplete the NWMO reserve for this purpose. So my preference would be to see that if we could just say funded out of reserves. I don't know if anybody agrees with me, but that would be my suggestion or request. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Can I add to that
Yeah.
through you, Mr. Mayor? So for the SVCA permit, the work by the flag, for example, is something that we're doing maintenance on and not needing a permit. Whereas this work, we're looking at re-engineering and possibly doing in-water work, which actually needs a permit from DFO as well. So there's a different scope. And so I've been very pleased with the feedback that I've been getting back from SVCA, and they've been helping me through this process. So I do believe that a permit is valid for this work. If we were just replacing stone, then Matt was willing to let us do that and work through that. But because we're going to be re-engineering and making it better, then that's the need. And when it comes to the funding, to me, it doesn't matter. I picked NWMO just because of the wording in that reserve about greater community benefit, but we still have money in the future capital reserve. So Director of Corporate Services was fine to use it out of either, and so am I.
Yeah, with regard to the SVCA, the question is not so much, the question is why we're in this situation of having to re-engineer the trail. The whole reason for the SVCA is to prevent us from being in this situation in the first place. We got a permit and we consulted, they were involved, and then our infrastructure was destroyed by the water. So having to repay for a permit at this point is, sort of adding insult to injury. I think we should, if review is necessary, I don't see why we should be paying for it. But anyway, those are my views. But with regard to the reserve, I don't think I can't support funding it out of the NWMO fund. I'd rather not do that. So, but I leave it to council to decide whether you want to leave that in there or not. Vice Deputy Mayor. Oh, you're on mute there, Mike.
All right. I understand your point about the NWMO. I highly recommend we spend the 50,000 with BM Ross single source, and I think your suggestion about to be taken from reserves, I have no issue with that. Just changing the wording. I know back when NWMO, when we talked about that fund, was for tree planting programs and other community initiatives. And I think what your point is, and it's a point well taken, is that we're starting to use it for capital restoration for stonework and that, maybe. So I think it's perhaps a stretch for NWMO. Don't want to go that direction. So I'd support that thought. I checked. I did reach out to the SVCA. Councillor Grace and I are members of the SVCA board of directors, and you go back into the policies and their manuals and so on and so forth, and what they're saying. I'm just looking at an email here that we, the dispute is whether it's a minor alteration, and this one, I think what Amanda's saying is that there's some pretty serious engineering work has to be done. I saw the work that happened down in Godridge, and it is pretty significant. And I know Godridge Kincardine is not deemed to be minor. It's major, and ours will be major work. And I think that's the stance, Mayor Charbonneau. I know you don't agree with it, but that's the stance that's VCA have taken. That this is major work. It's some pretty serious engineering stuff has to happen. So I think I know we'll probably end up paying it, but I know you won't be happy about it.
Wouldn't be the first time. Okay, so will you move an amendment to fund this from reserves rather than the NWMO reserve?
Yeah, I can make that amendment. I just want this to go ahead, and I think BM Ross is great. So I'd make that as an amendment that we fund from reserves rather than NWMO. I understand that your position.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Rich. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, so that moves us back to the main motion as amended. If there's no further discussion, I will ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, then that moves us on to bylaws, and there are 6 bylaws there for your review. Does any member wish to draw out any one of those bylaws for individual consideration? Councilor Grace. You're on mute there, Cheryl.
The parking bylaw update, I wanted to, I have a couple of questions about that.
That's 48/2020. All right, we'll draw that one out. Councilor Mayette, or pardon me, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Here we go. The bylaw 49/2020, there were a few questions sent in by a local taxpayer today. I thought it's only fair that we raise those questions.
Okay, so that's 4 and 5. Are there any others? So what I will do is,
Nope.
oh, pardon me, the Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor.
Okay, number 3, 47/2020, the traffic bylaw.
Okay. Okay. Any others? So what I'll do is there a mover and seconder for the entire resolution? I take a mover, you will have moved and seconded all of these, but I'll take them out separately. Is there a mover and seconder for this whole thing? Moved by Rich, seconded by Schreyer. All right, so I'm going to read 1, 2, and 6, but I can't confirm the proceedings, so I'll read 1 and 2, and then I'll take the other ones individually. So here we go. See if I get this right. It's been moved by Councilor Rich, seconded by Councilor Schreyer, that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 13th day of July 2020. 145/2020 being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with the Southampton Arts Centre, and 246/2020 being a bylaw to authorize the entering into of a subdivision agreement with Castle Village Developments and Seaton Southampton Limited for the development of phase 1 of the Southampton Landing subdivision. Questions or comments to those bylaws? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. I have a resolution moved by Councilor Rich, seconded by Councilor Schreyer, that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 13th day of July 2020. 3, 47/2020 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 103/2008 to regulate and or control traffic in the town of Saugeen Shores. Are there questions or comments to that bylaw? Deputy Mayor, did you have a Vice Councilor
Oh,
Grace?
sorry. Are we on
This is the
traffic
traffic.
bylaw? Okay, yes. We had a question sent in today by one of our residents, and the question is, should we be looking at the speed of traffic on Bruce Street? It is at 50 kilometers. Should we have a consistent down to at least 40? Because there's stretches in there where speed does get up, and it goes almost to the school zone. 50 is a little quick in town. Is that something we could look at moving down to 40?
For the director.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. Bruce Street's a collector road, so just by looking at it, it's not something that I would support reducing to 40. All roads in Port Elgin have a speed limit of 50 unless otherwise reviewed and through this bylaw. The Transportation Master Plan, I have now read the policies and procedures section of it with the consultant, and they have 3 procedures in it for us to use. One is a traffic calming application process. One is an always stop analysis, and one is a speed limit reduction. So I can commit to you that as part of that, when the TMP comes to you late August, early September, I'll bring Bruce Street as an example of how to use those 3 procedures, and then we'll have engineering behind it because we've been asked for all 3 things on that specific street.
Because I'm looking at specifically, I think it's Mill Street all the way to Joseph. There's only one stop there the whole way through. Traffic does get up to a pretty good speed clicking through there. You also have the church in that area. A lot of kids crossing that road to get to the public schools. So if we can look at ways to calm the traffic, slow it down, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Through you, it would be, he's asking from Pearson to Joseph, but I would say it would be more Devonshire to Catherine Street that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a commitment. We'll hear more about that when the Transportation Master Plan comes back for review later in the summer. So if there's nothing further, I'll ask all in favor of the bylaw. That's carried. Okay, that moves us then on to a resolution moved by Councillor Rich, second by Councillor Schreyer, that the following bylaws hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 13th day of July 2020. 48/2020 being a bylaw to amend parking bylaw 51, 2013 to regulate parking, stopping, and standing of vehicles in the town of Saugeen Shores. Questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question about this is on Chantry View Drive. The recommendation is to remove the boulevard parking, the former boulevard parking recommendation on the south side, and instead to have no parking on either side from Lake to Huron. I think that's right. Is that my understanding correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, so I continue to get feedback from residents, and that's, I think I've got 3 people who are concerned about speed on Chantry View. It's not a long stretch, but coming down that hill, I think from Huron, or maybe accelerating up the hill, but on either way, since the changes have been made, the construction has been completed on Chantry View, there is a concern about increased speed. And maybe I'm hoping this could be combined with your consideration of traffic calming measures on Bruce Street. One of the concerns or suggestions of one of the residents is to allow for parking on the asphalt as being on the south side as being a traffic calming measure. If there's a car there, then people tend to slow down. If there are no cars there, then they, feel like they can speed. But other suggestions that people have come up with is perhaps painted lines across the Knowles Lane intersection as a visual calming measure. Some other people have suggested a 4-way stop there. But I wonder if we could consider, because this summer is unusual in that neighborhood, because the tennis club is not at full force this summer. It's not what's happening there, even though there is increased speed. We don't have the number of kids because they don't have lessons at the tennis club this summer. Ordinarily, that's a very busy area with lots of bikes, and it would be nice if we could reconsider that in terms of trying to get some traffic calming measures in there.
Right here.
Thank you. Through you, we can add it on for sure as one of the roads we can look at for traffic calming. When we did the design, though, we agreed to reduce the asphalt width, so it's only a 7.5 meter asphalt width. So I don't have the ability to put a parking lane plus 2 lanes of travel on that road. And that was part of that compromise with the residents as we did that. So what we had agreed to was put in boulevard parking on the south side so that we could still accommodate some of the cottagers that didn't have parking abilities. And this, when we look at it, there's only 2 spots that could come in there that would be away from the hydrant and hydro poles. So I just, because the people that own the property adjacent to that were against it, I thought there's a parking at the bottom of the road by the washrooms, and that maybe adding 2 wasn't worth having it on the boulevard there. So I will add it to a traffic calming service request for when this policy comes in and see if there's a need for that there. I believe it's a 40 km/h speed limit already. That section is about 200 meters long. So we have traffic data from 2 years ago with speeds, and we can look at that. If we need to do another traffic count, we can do that as well.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on the traffic study we did there 2 years ago when we had the vehicle, the bird, doing clock at 90 going down that road. One possibility with that is, sorry, I just found that funny. In the summertime, when we get back to normal, a bird doing 90, that we make that a one-way from Huron Street to Adelaide once we get through there, because that would calm the traffic down. It's one way, goes to the tennis court, and you don't have to worry about cars coming up and down. It's a one-way street. But that's just something for later on. And people have mentioned that to me as well. It is a very busy spot. The boulevard is very tricky, especially when people start pulling up and then you've got to try and weasel around that little curve, and you got more cars on that side, and then there's supposed to be no parking up to the stop sign, but we know that there's parking on the up to the stop sign. So making sure that there's nothing on Chantry View is a good first step, but we've got to look after the rest of it.
Okay, if there's nothing further on that bylaw, I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, then I have a resolution moved by Councillor Rich, second by Councillor Schreyer, that the following bylaw is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 13th day of July, 2020. 5/49/2020 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 63/2015, being the bylaw to govern the calling, place, and proceedings of meetings of the corporation of the town of Saugeen Shores. Questions or comments to the bylaw? Vice Deputy Mayor, did you have comments to the bylaw? This is the procedural bylaw.
Sorry. Got me off guard there. Yeah, I was just wondering if our clerk Linda White could maybe bring up those 3 questions that were sent to her and all of council today. Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether you have those 3 questions that were sent to all of us. I'd just like to address them if I could. I did, Linda, I didn't know whether you had those 3 questions in front of you. The number 1 question, I was hoping you maybe I'll make comment on, you're the mayor, but the second question, you know, with the writer of the email to us today talked about decorum and the code of conduct, you know, what's proper decorum is a clause in here that speaks to individuals shall be responsible for conducting themselves with decorum. And the author of the note today mentioned that, you know, council should be included. I just wanted to say that, you know, back to our code of conduct document today, and we also have in our document that we treat members of the public with respect and proper decorum. And so, and from what I've seen in my 2 terms on council, you know, I believe we do that. I know I do it. You should make every effort to do that. And so I don't think it needs to be included in this document for this bylaw. It's in our own code of conduct. So I want to comment on number 2 point. But there are a couple other points in there, whether or not, Linda, just wondering if the number 1 comment, the point she made about making comments on, I'm sorry, I don't have her email right in front of me. That's why I asked you to bring it up. But there was talk about commenting on RFPs and so on and so forth. Could you maybe just verify, clarify why members of the public during their delegations and in open forum aren't permitted to speak to that particular area? Do you have the questions in front of you, Linda, from that email that was sent today?
I do, if you're referring to the one from the Podaugan Beach Preservers.
Yes.
So yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the question was with respect to why is open forum restricted and we cannot speak to items that are upcoming from delegations. So delegations have put forward their written presentation to council. They've taken the time, they've written it out. They're making their presentation to council. Council doesn't make a decision directly to the delegation when they're making that evening. So an open forum is intended in this particular case to make a presentation to those items on the agenda where council is actually making a decision. So delegations, no decisions are typically made at a delegation stage. Similarly with council's information, council's receiving the information. No decision is being made on that. So I think we're just trying to focus open forum to those items where council's making the decisions.
And I agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Number 3.
Yeah, so with respect to RFPs, typically anything that's under negotiation, such as an RFP, is not a subject matter that is entertained by council during an open forum.
I think it's important, if I could just add to what Linda said, and this, I want to point out that this discussion was had at the striking committee about particularly about the first point on why delegations and correspondence were not included in terms of topics for the open forum. And it's important to remember that the reason why, the whole reason for our meetings is for us to do business and for the public to comment on the business that we are doing. We don't want to set up a situation where folks are debating each other at council meetings, right? So I think we don't want to put somebody in a situation where they, as Linda pointed out, they write a delegation and then 5 people line up out of the blue beforehand to criticize what they haven't even said yet. And we don't want to set up a situation where somebody writes a letter and then somebody responds to the letter and council isn't even dealing with the issue, right? It's a conversation happening that's totally separate from council's business. And so I think the purpose of the reason why we want to hear from the public is to hear their point of view on things that the municipality is doing, and to hear specifically a couple of things that we are considering at that time. And so that's the reason for those, for the focus on the areas that don't involve correspondence.
And Mr. Mayor, I agree with you 100%. I just thought that this rate taxpayer wanted to have the questions asked, and so I presented them, and I understand completely, and I agree that I want to hear the delegation and speaker for the first time. I don't want members of the open forum coming in and challenging a speaker before we've even heard them. So I think it's a good procedural bylaw. So Lynn, did I miss one question in there or not? Are we okay? Did I catch them all? I think I did.
I think that covered it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on this file? I don't see anything, so I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay, and then finally, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Rich, seconded by Councillor Schreyer, that the following bylaws hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 13th day of July 2020, 6/50/2020, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meetings of the corporation of the town of Saugeen Shores. All in favor? That's carried. All right, and that moves us then to adjournment. I have a motion that this regular council meeting of July 13th, 2020 hereby adjourns at 9:21 p.m. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Smith, seconded by Schreyer. All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.